When precious Luna couldn't stand up anymore, the veterinarian did an ultrasound scan on the gorilla, and what he discovered shocked him completely. When the normally happy and fun-loving gorilla, Precious Luna, a 12-year-old Western land gorilla who had called the zoo home since she was a baby, couldn't get on her feet for many days, a worried visitor got the zookeeper's attention. The gorilla was supposed to be expecting a baby for a long time now, but she still hadn't delivered. After looking up information about how long gorillas are pregnant, this visitor thought something wasn't right. Even from his spot, he could see the animal was suffering and really bothered by her huge belly. When the zookeepers finally listened to him, they quickly dismissed his worries. There's nothing wrong with the animal at all, they said, and told the visitor to mind his own business. Precious Luna had always been the main attraction and source of fun for visitors since she arrived at Bayou Wildlife Park, a private zoo on the outskirts of Louisiana. And this wasn't the first worried visitor to mention Luna's problem. But nothing ever changed. These zookeepers refused to change anything. Luna is having a baby and just feeling a bit cranky. She's perfectly fine, they kept saying. But the gorilla wasn't fine at all. She desperately needed help. Luckily, it wasn't until a famous social media influencer, Jake, who had over 2 million followers on Instagram, came to the zoo, that Luna finally got the help she needed. One of his followers had told him about the terrible conditions at the zoo, especially about the supposedly pregnant gorilla who stayed pregnant way too long and looked very sick. Jake didn't believe the tip at first, but when he saw the animal himself and how the zookeepers ignored his concerns, he knew he had to act. This is absolutely unacceptable, Jake said to the zookeeper. That animal is clearly suffering. She's just moody because of the pregnancy. The zookeeper replied dismissively. Nothing to worry about. There was lots of response and comments from many people who had visited the zoo recently, too. They had also noticed the many troubling things happening there, but nobody had been able to change anything. They talked about how sad, sick, and swollen the animals, not just Luna, appeared. One commenter wrote that he had brought this to the zookeepers' attention, but they brushed it off as just a small mood change in the gorilla. The next day, the zoo had many visitors who came to see the gorilla, and some took photos of her. When these photos were shared online, people became more worried, as many said the gorilla's pregnancy didn't look normal. People watching online started demanding that the zoo examine the animal properly. Usually pregnancy lasts about 8.5 months for gorillas. The poor animal had been carrying her large bulging belly for almost 10 months and 3 weeks. The more the news spread, the more attention it got. Many veterinarians and experts started questioning whether the animal was actually pregnant at all. Several people online also shared their experiences at the zoo, especially about the caretakers' and owners' carelessness and uncaring attitude toward their animals' health. This was a major problem at the zoo, that people who noticed the gorilla's strange behavior and condition brought up. The anger finally made visitors speak out against the private zoo and try to get higher authorities involved. For days after the reports, the zoo owners took no action or gave any response. Dr. James, an experienced wildlife veterinarian with 15 years specializing in large mammals, decided to go check on the animal himself and figure out what was wrong. When Dr. James went to the zoo the next day to examine the gorilla, that had become so famous he was refused entry along with several other visitors who came that day. When word spread, police were called and they went to check on the animal. When they arrived at the zoo, protesters demanding justice for the gorilla had gathered at the gate. There was so much commotion that police had to force the zoo owners to shut down until the public's concerns were addressed. Dr. James went to the zoo and asked to be allowed to see and treat the gorilla, but the staff insisted everything was fine with Luna. Dr. James made a deal with the zookeepers. He would examine the animal and help with the protests if everything was truly okay with her. If she's really fine, like you say, let me prove it, Dr. James told them. Fine, but you'll see we're right, the manager responded. They agreed and let him in. When he got inside, he went straight to Luna's enclosure. When he got there, his heart dropped at the sight of the gorilla. The poor creature lay at the edge of her cramped concrete enclosure, looking pale, very weak, and completely unable to move. The air was thick with the stench of rotting fruit and waste, and flies buzzed around the stagnant water in her drinking trough. She was surrounded by her own waste, rotten bananas, and treats, probably thrown at her by visitors. One of the zoo workers said she hadn't eaten anything they gave her for a long time. She just lay there watching quietly and falling asleep occasionally. Sure enough, Luna looked pregnant at first glance. A belly that big was hard to miss. But this didn't look like a normal pregnancy to Dr. James either. Not knowing that the younger worker had revealed that the gorilla hadn't been eating, the manager who joined them started lying to the doctor, clearly trying to distract from the horrible scene in front of them. The gorilla is just having a difficult pregnancy and our resident veterinarian is handling it, she claimed. She added that Luna had simply been overeating, which explained why she was so tired and sluggish all the time. That's clearly not true, Dr. James said firmly. Look at this enclosure. Where's your veterinarian? Dr. James knew all of this was false. Based on the state of Luna's enclosure, there probably wasn't a veterinarian taking care of her, and no overeating was happening either. Something terrible was going on, and he wanted to uncover it. Dr. James insisted on performing an ultrasound on the gorilla to diagnose and possibly treat her. He was told to come back the next day because his work would disturb the zoo's head veterinarian. Dr. James felt he had no choice but to agree. Besides, he wanted to be as cooperative as possible so they wouldn't suspect anything. He could barely sleep that night and returned to the zoo very early the next morning with his ultrasound equipment packed. The morning air was crisp and foggy as Dr. James arrived at Bayou Wildlife Park just after dawn. When he arrived at the zoo, he was shocked by what he found. Many enclosures that had been full of animals the day before were now empty. Many of the zoo's animals seemed to have disappeared completely. The zoo was partially empty because they had secretly moved some animals to an unknown location. Dr. James was now certain they were up to no good. He was surprised they hadn't moved Luna yet, but he suspected they couldn't. Worried about what would happen to her and the other animals they had hidden, Dr. James posted an update online. Soon after, reporters started arriving at the zoo to see what was happening and report live. The zoo's veterinarian told Dr. James there was no need to bother the gorilla. Luna is fine, they kept insisting. When Dr. James stood his ground and started threatening the man, the zoo vet finally admitted something was wrong with the animal. But it was too much trouble and effort. Look, it's easier if we just put her down and get another one, the zoo vet said coldly. Are you insane? Dr. James shouted. How can you say that? About a living animal? Dr. James was horrified and outraged. How could a trained veterinarian say such a thing about an animal? Dr. James was now more determined than ever to examine the gorilla, unaware of the terrible things he would soon discover. At this time, more reporters and supporters were already gathering at the zoo entrance, and some were protesting and trying to disturb the security guards. It was getting out of control, and nothing was being done about the situation. It seemed like the zoo owners would rather have the animal die than save its life. After another hour of arguing with the zoo staff, the noise outside got louder. Dr. James made a decision and stepped outside the zoo to address the protesters. He explained to them how serious Precious Luna's condition might be at that moment. He mentioned he had been at the zoo since early morning asking for permission to examine the animal but had been denied. I'm willing to help. For free, he told the crowd. I just want to make sure the animal we all care about is healthy and gets proper treatment. This caused an uproar among the crowd, and the commotion eventually forced police to come and control the chaos. After hearing what caused the uproar, they asked the zoo owners to step aside and let the good veterinarian do his job. It seemed they were also aware of the situation and knew it was important to uncover whatever was being hidden at this facility. The zoo had no choice but to let Dr. James through. When Dr. James was finally allowed into the enclosure with the animal, he put on his full protective gear and got to work. Dr. James carefully entered the animal enclosure, unsure of what to expect. He slowly approached the animal so as not to scare her or the younger ones around her. But as if they knew he was there to help their friend, they all moved to another part of the enclosure. Dr. James walked up to Precious Luna, but the animal remained motionless and lethargic. She just lay there, surrendering with an empty stare as if completely depressed. This behavior didn't go unnoticed by Dr. James, who became very concerned. He moved closer to the animal and gently touched her leg, but she didn't move or react. She looked like she had been lying in the same position for several days. He hoped he wasn't too late to help her. Setting up his equipment, Dr. James began examining Precious Luna. He was surprised to see that the area around her private parts was quite clean for an animal that hadn't moved for days. Precious Luna was dehydrated, pale and losing weight despite her protruding belly. The gorilla's breathing slowed and her eyes drooped. But what worried Dr. James most was her irregular heartbeat that he could hear through his stethoscope. Her condition seemed to be getting worse by the minute. Dr. James knew he had to act quickly to save Luna's life. We're running out of time, he muttered to himself as he noticed Luna's breathing becoming more labored. Sorry for the interruption. Before we continue with the story, I kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It is very important for us. Thank you very much. He set up his portable ultrasound machine and began examining the gorilla's belly. As he moved the probe around, his eyes focused on the machine screen. But the images were confusing and unclear. Come on, show me what's going on in there, he whispered, adjusting the probe angle and cleaning the gel off several times. The Ultrasound machine made strange beeping sounds as he struggled to get a clear picture. He suddenly stopped and froze. He moved the probe deeper, his eyes glued to the screen, trying different angles to make sense of what he was seeing. "This doesn't look right at all," he said quietly, his voice filled with concern. He cleaned the probe again and pressed it against different areas of Luna's swollen belly. "Wait, I don't see any fetal movement. No heartbeat." His eyes widened as the realization hit him. "This isn't a pregnancy," he said, in shock. His eyes widened even more, and he screamed in horror when he finally understood what he was looking at. "There's a massive foreign object in there." He couldn't believe what he was seeing. It wasn't an overdue pregnancy, like they had all thought or pretended. In fact, it wasn't a pregnancy at all. He looked closer at the screen, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to get a better view of what was inside the animal's belly. Whatever he saw made him grab his gloves and reach for his scalpel and syringe. "I need to operate immediately," he announced to the crowd outside. "Her life depends on it." The challenge was getting the anesthesia dosage right for a gorilla Luna size. Too little and she'd wake up during surgery. Too much could kill her. After carefully calculating the dose, he injected the nearly unconscious animal with anesthesia to numb the pain and ensure both their safety, then quickly made a clean cut in her stomach. By this time, several protesters were standing outside the enclosure, quietly watching and recording the veterinarian working on the unconscious animal. Some could be seen praying and getting emotional as they didn't know what the outcome would be. They were afraid this could be the end of the playful and entertaining precious Luna. Dr. James worked quickly for the next 2 hours and 40 minutes cleaning out the gorilla's stomach. Luna was not pregnant. Her stomach contained huge masses of undigested food waste and feces, meaning there had to be blockage somewhere. He had to relieve the pressure temporarily, but they would need to get the animal to a proper operating room to save her life. He immediately called for help, and people rallied around for an ambulance. Soon they arrived to help, and the gorilla was carefully transported to Dr. James's veterinary clinic where they could properly intervene. Everything happened quickly as they rushed to prepare and get her to the operating table. The next step was to remove whatever was causing the blockage in the animal's stomach and intestines. As sweat poured down their faces, they finally found the source of the problem. Right there they saw a large piece of plastic wrapper about the size of a dinner plate from what appeared to be fruit packaging, blocking Luna's intestines from passing undigested food and waste to her bowels for elimination. Dr. James couldn't understand how the gorilla had managed to swallow the piece of plastic. It was a clear example of neglect by the zoo caretakers. They had most likely not completely removed the wrapping from the fruit before giving it to the animals, and precious Luna happened to be the unlucky one to swallow it. Dr. James was able to remove the blockage and clean up the gorilla. The surgical team worked tirelessly to repair Luna and get her stable, and finally they succeeded. Dr. James was amazed by the zookeepers' carelessness. He just couldn't understand how they let things get to this point. It was frustrating to see their lack of concern for the gorilla's health. It felt like they didn't even care if she survived. Their attitude was really disappointing. The story quickly spread as reporters came to Dr. James' clinic for interviews. The public was eager for updates on precious Luna's condition, while Dr. James was happy to share the Good news. He also made sure to address the neglect precious Luna had suffered. They had found the problem and successfully saved Luna, but the zoo owners would have to face legal consequences. Over the next 3 weeks, Dr. James dedicated himself to nursing Luna back to health. She made an amazing recovery and was soon thriving, looking healthier than ever. Meanwhile, Dr. James' acts of kindness had made him a national hero, with many considering him a celebrity for his exceptional care of the animal. His wildlife veterinary clinic became a popular destination for pet owners and farmers throughout Louisiana. His expertise was sought not only for household pets but also for farm animals. He wrote a petition against the private zoo owners, supported by many people online, and they were able to ensure that the owners were prosecuted and lost their license. The remaining animals were moved to a different location where they could receive proper care, including precious Luna. The world would forever be grateful to good veterinarians like Dr. James for saving precious Luna's life. Did you enjoy this story? Would you have acted like Dr. James and refused to give up on Luna? Let us know in the comments below. If you like the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Never give up when you see someone suffering. Your voice can save a life. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.